Sometimes when you're watching old movies, it can be helpful to think about them in terms of historical context. So today, let's talk about one of the seminal silent films, certainly one of the most influential horror films ever made, Nosferatu, A Symphony of Horror. Nosferatu was directed by F.W. Murnau in Germany in 1922. It was an unauthorized adaptation of Bram Stoker's novel Dracula, which at that time was still protected by copyright. Stoker himself had died, but his widow was controlling his estate, and she actually sued the filmmakers over the film. They had made a number of changes to distance themselves from being a strict adaptation, including changing many of the names. Count Dracula was now Count Orlok. Despite those changes, the court ordered all copies of the film to be destroyed. Thankfully, there were copies that survived, and we still have the masterpiece Nosferatu, A Symphony of Horror to this day. Now, why is Nosferatu such a significant film? Well, it's a key example of the German Expressionist movement. Expressionism was a movement that was born out of the rubble of World War I. The German people were in a very dark place, which of course decades later would lead to the rise of the Nazi Party, unfortunately. So there's a big dark cloud hanging over Germany during the 1920s, and of course that starts affecting the art that's being created. German art is often very heavily influenced by a literary movement called naturalism, which is kind of the opposite of romanticism. So rather than focusing on the heightening of emotions, we're focusing more on the natural world and kind of the cruelty of nature and the idea of even humanity itself as a force of nature. In the movie Nosferatu, the vampire is a representation almost of a perversion of nature. When he comes to the small little German village that's the center of the story, he brings with him pestilence and plague. Spoilers, and of course it's only through the sacrifice of an innocent person at the end that he's able to be destroyed, and yet even in his destruction, it's through naturalistic forces. It's the sunlight. By the way, this was really where that part of the vampire mythology comes into play. The sunlight thing wasn't really a part of the novel Dracula. Dracula actually goes out in sunlight. It's just his powers are weakened. It was really F.W. Murnau who brought in this idea of a vampire being destroyed by sunlight. And he's destroyed at the end when the heroine sacrifices herself to keep him distracted until the sun rises. So how is it that Nosferatu is an example of the German Expressionist movement? Well, it's a very nightmarish film with a lot of heavy uses of shadows and weird lighting. The filmmaking isn't necessarily about creating a sense of reality, but creating a distortion of reality that feels oppressive emotionally. We had seen that begin a couple years earlier with the classic film The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari by Robert Wiene. That film is even more exaggerated and stylized, but Nosferatu continues that tradition, and so to this day, thankfully, we still have the wonderful silent film Nosferatu, A Symphony of Horror, featuring the great performance by Max Schreck as Count Orlok, standing in for Count Dracula.